Hello, my friends. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be talking today about 1% changes. Um, Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking today about 1% changes. And this will be useful if you have ideas and dreams that you never seem to be taking action on. Another day goes by, another week goes by, or you might find a year later, nothing has changed for you. The things I'm going to share today will help you get started in a meaningful way toward the thing that you want. On the other hand, you might not even find that you have dreams or ideas. You might be so discouraged because of your physical limitation, because of rheumatoid arthritis, or whatever it might be, or the impact of someone else's physical limitation. You might find that because of that situation, you're not dreaming at all. The things I'm going to share today will give you a few tools that will change all of that for you. So you will start dreaming. And not only that, but you will start taking action toward that dream, even if it's 1% change at a time. Okay? So that's our topic. Um, I'm going to share a bit from the British cycling team, where a lot of this topic comes from, or at least how I was introduced to it, um, and this very inspirational story about what changed for the cycling team because of this mindset of 1%. Um, Through that discussion, we'll talk a little bit about how effective is 1% really. I'm going to talk a little bit about what tends to get in our way, and then some step by step tips and tools for you to get started. All right. If you'd like to get these notes in more detail and some of the step-by-step things I'm going to be sharing, um, you can click the link. Let me just double check. Click the link that says more content. There's a link associated with this that says um, chandlerlifecoaching.com/more content. You can add your email to that list, and so you'll get all the content here. I'll share this content, and then of course you'll get future content, all related to disempowering pain and creating really a full, meaningful, and abundant life despite the impact of a physical limitation. All right, so let's talk about this cycling team. Let's see, I'm just going to pull up some notes. So the information I'm going to be referencing comes from an article from James Clear that summarizes this content that's written in his book called Atomic Habits. All right. Um, so So here's the story. Great Britain had this cycling team that essentially had a record of mediocrity for about 100 years. Um, since 1908 to the early 2000s, British riders, these cyclists, had won just one gold medal at the Olympic Games in that 100-year period. And they fared even worse in cycling's biggest race, the Tour de France. Um, in 110 years, no British cyclist ever won that event. Um, their record and reputation in cycling was so bad that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe refused to sell bikes to the team. They were so afraid that if this team was riding this company's bikes and others knew about that, it would negatively impact the brand of this company and the brand of these bikes, and it would negatively impact their sales um, because people knew about just this poor reputation of this British cyclist team. So, what changed in the early 2000s Um, the organization hired Brailsford. Dave Brailsford had this approach, and he described it as a methodology called the aggregation of marginal gains. The aggregation of marginal gains, which focuses on hey, how can we make very minor changes frequently? And so the general rule of thumb or the general principle that could be applied here is 1% change every day, or 1% improvement every day. And so what that meant for this team, they started trying all kinds of things, changes to the gear, to the bicycles, to the preparation of the cyclists, to their sleep, the type of pillows they had or mattresses they slept on, um, everything around body conditioning and recovery, strength building. I mean, all across the board, they looked at everything related to um, the factors that might lead to success, right? The factors that would lead to success for cyclists. And they were asking constantly, what is just a very minor change we can make? Very minor. And so these were things like different pedals on their bikes, right? Or, like I said, a different pillow. Um, so this and they very much approached it as an experiment. Like, hey, we're gonna test these things. We're gonna test it. We're gonna try this very minor change. We're gonna test it, see how it goes, and see. And um, from what I gather too, actually, that testing is based on a kind of a long-term view. They might not see immediate results because the change they make is so minor that the results, especially at first, might be hard to observe. But there was this belief, this philosophy, this approach that says um, these minor changes over time will add to outsized gains. We will experience results. We might not see it for some time, but in time, those results will come. And this, in fact, was the case. 5 years after they implemented this approach, the British cycling team dominated the road and track cycling events at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing. They won 60% of the gold medals available. Okay, and this is a team that, remember what I shared at the beginning? Since 1900, what was the year? 1908, they had won just one gold medal. And now in 2008, just 5 years after they implemented this 1% change philosophy, they won 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years later, when the Olympic Games came to London, they raised the bar again. They set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. That same year, Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. The next year, his teammate Chris Froome won the race, and he would go on to win again in 2015 and 2016 and 2017. This gave the British team 5 Tour de France victories in over a 6-year period. 5 victories over a 6-year period. So during that a 10-year span from 2007 to 2017, the British cyclists won 178 world championships, 66 Olympic and Paralympic gold medals, and 5 Tour de France victories. And this is considered in history, like widely considered one of the most successful run in cycling history. Oh my word. I mean, this is crazy, right? That those kinds of stats, those achievements, those results that came over this 10-year period, only 5 years after implementing this philosophy of 1%, is astounding. I mean, I just think that we so often hear these kinds of stories and we just underestimate the simplicity of the method, a very simple method that led to these astounding results. And so I just invite you, I mean, and this is what I think about when I hear about the story. I'm like, is this principle true in my life? Of course, the answer is yes. If we were to implement this methodology into our lives, we might not see immediate changes right away, but it's inevitable that over time, as you are making small changes, over time, those add up and you will experience outsized results. You will get to a place where you don't even recognize your life or yourself compared to who you were or what situation you were in 5 years ago. And um, so, the power of tiny gains, the power of marginal gains is what this is about. In the beginning, as you make these minor changes, there's basically no difference. You hardly see any change. You might not experience any change. But as time goes on, small improvements, small gains compound, and you suddenly find there's a very big gap of where you used to be and where you are now. All right. Um, let's see. There's the story. Oh my word! It's just incredible the impact, the change, the transformation that happened for this team from making these 1% changes. Um, so how effective is this? I mean, I think I think the question is like, well, it took them 5 years, and you might be asking yourself, I don't know if I want to wait 5 years. Is there a faster route, right? I mean, marginal gains can get me there maybe in 5 years, but why not get to what I want this year? Like, can I do that? And this is the exact trap that we fall into over and over again. We start thinking that we want to get what we want now. We want to get it sooner. We're in some pain right now. We're in some discomfort. We're not happy or whatever it might be. And so we're trying to find immediate relief. We're trying to find immediate transformation. We're trying to find the fastest route. And by looking for the fastest route, we fall into the trap of nothing, taking no action. What ends up happening when we're focused on the fast path is we get on the no path. The path, we don't even get on the path. When we're so focused on the fast path. This is part of the reason why 1% changes is so powerful. That is where the power is. It allows us to get on to a path. When we're focused on big changes, we end up without a path. We stay off the path. When we focus on very small changes, we actually step onto a path. I'm saying a path intentionally because it might not be the path at first. It might be one that fails. It might be one that's like, you know what? Over some time, we realize this isn't really getting us where we want to be. But guess what? You learned something very valuable from getting onto that path. You now know I need to make some different types of changes. And you didn't have that information before you started on this path. You've made progress. So the whole idea with 1% changes is action over inaction. Progress over perfection. One example for me recently, and I may have shared this before. If you heard it before, I'm sorry. A goal that I set this year, and this isn't like a huge thing. This isn't like a big change in my life, but it's significant considering my history. My history is that I have not read a full book, front to back, that is unrelated to work, and I would say unrelated to like life coaching or self-development. Those topics I have read a whole lot, right? But I'm like thinking about more recreational reading, reading um, on something other than those topics, or education. Okay, work, life coaching, education. I've read a bunch of stuff related to those things, but beyond that, nothing since high school when I read Harry Potter. That is the last time I read a full book front to back. I'll also say when it comes to work, life coaching, education, it's actually debatable. I don't think I've read a full book from front to back. I'm jumping all over the place. I will find a chapter. I'm very targeted in that reading. And so over the past like 5 years, I've been like, man, I just want to read a book. I really want to. I come across, I'm just so curious about the world and people's lives and history and so many things. I'm like, I would love to just like read a full book on a single topic or about a single person, and I want to read that book front to back. And I have had that idea or that dream for at least 5 years, and it never happened. So this is the classic example of where I started. It's like you have a dream, you have a desire, something you want to do, something you want to experience, something you want to create, or whatever, and you just find that day after day, or a year later, you're like, oh, mm, another year gone by, I haven't done that. And then, by the way, guess what happens? You start creating this identity that you aren't that thing. And so for me, the identity that I started to develop was like, I don't read books. And that identity then became stronger each year that I failed to read a book. And it ended up reinforcing the story so much that my brain was out to prove it true because that's what the brain cares about is being right and being efficient. And so it's like this endless vicious cycle of just like not reading a book. So, um, this is what I did this year. Uh, at the beginning of this year in January, I said to myself, one, one book. In past years, I've just had a more general like, I want to read more. I had this vision of like many books. There's many things I come across. I'm like, oh, I'd love to read that. And then again, that's the um, no path. I get on no path. I have like big goals, big change. I want it fast. I want lots of information right now, lots of books. So what do? I stay off the path. I don't even get on a path. In this case, I'm like, one book. And I could have said this month, right? By the end of January. If I go back to the beginning of this year when I was having this like planning, my old self would have said like, I can read a book maybe in a month or maybe in 3 months. Like by end of March, I want to have one book read. Um, but what I did instead was I applied this concept of 1% change and making like very, very minor change, a smaller step. And for me, that was one book this year. By the end of this year, I want to have one book read. That's what I'm 100% committed to. In my mind, I'm like, that's a slam dunk. That's easy. I should be able to, I mean, 1 year is plenty of time. And so I got started and I picked up a book. I chose one that was interesting to me. I started reading. I had all these times where I was like reading a lot, and then I had a period of weeks, sometimes maybe 2 months, of no reading. But I'm like, you know what? I just am gonna get to it and get this book read by the end of this year. And guess what? I just finished it this week. Every page I read from front to back, and so I took a moment to celebrate. I'm celebrating right now. I'm like, yes, go me. I mean, that's amazing. You know how long it's been since high school? It's been like over like 20 years, since I have read a book front to back. And it happened because I focus on inaction over inaction, progress over perfection, marginal change. And that's what made this possible. Um, the other reason why it's so effective is because it creates focus and constant evaluation. When you're making small changes, the thing that you're implementing often comes over like a short period of time or has short cycles of like iterative process that you can evaluate and be like, okay, how am I doing with that thing? It just is it creates a very manageable thing that you can constantly focus on and evaluate. And that's what I was doing with the book thing. I just one book, and I got to like revisit it and reevaluate. I'm like, oh, how am I doing? Oh, gosh, I haven't picked it up for 2 months. Oh, that's okay. My goal was just one this year. And so that got me back on the path and back going. The other thing that marginal changes does is it allows necessary time for transformation. Um, Transformation when it comes to our beliefs, our life, our circumstance, sometimes, I would say more often is the case, that takes time. And when we want it to happen quickly, we end up again just staying off the path. We don't even start because we're like, I tried, like it didn't work, things haven't changed, and so then we just abort. But instead, if we take this view of long term, like 1 year or 5 years, I'm going to allow that time for this thing, and we just focus on marginal changes, very small changes, then that process of transformation can take place. And you'll be somewhere in a year or in 5 years that you'll be like, wow. And for me in this case, 8 months. Like 8 months ago, I'm like, I've never read a book. And now 8 months later, I'm like, wow, I've done it. It happened. It took 8 months. I gave myself a year. It took 8 months. And before, my old self would be like, that's way too long to read a book. But now I'm like, no, I did it. And now I actually have some of that habit, some of that skill. I learned to like stick with a book and complete it. That is so valuable. So extremely valuable. Um, all right. Here's what I want to do. We're 20 minutes in and I have so much more to talk about here. And so I'm going to do a part two. We're going to call this part one. 1% changes. Hey, speaking of like 1% marginal, all right, that goes along with this topic. We're going to do this in chunks, small bits. So this is part one. And part two, I'm going to talk about what gets in our way. I've already addressed some of that, but I want to elaborate on it a bit more. Why we stumble, um, what is challenging about the 1% methodology, and then finally, I want to talk about what changes of 1% might look like. In other words, what that process might look like for you, what tools you can use, what questions you can start asking to start that journey of 1%. Start implementing that process. So that's what part two is going to be about. I can't wait to start talking about that. I might go ahead and email out some of the notes from part one. So if you want to get those notes, click more content, provide your name and email address there, and we'll continue the conversation. I can't wait to talk again. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll speak again soon. Bye, everyone.